We are the end of the day, but you guys will get to be here very soon. First up, this interview. So, Mike, you are running the entire SuccessFactors HCM suite. And you're at SAP, but you did come from a BPO background. What have you learned from your experience about the vendor's relationship with the customer?
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting because, I spent most of my career sort of in the fringes of technology, but pretty much in the IT outsourcing, business process outsourcing space, and then moved into the cloud world. And I think what is really interesting is that the outsourcing world and the cloud world are opposite sides of the same coin. And the on-premise software world is a totally different coin. And, the best way I can describe it is that, and this may not be politically correct, but, the on-premise software world is like having a one-night stand. You drop the software and run. The cloud world is like a marriage. You hooked up with the customer for hopefully a lifetime. And it's very similar to the way you run outsourcing. I remember in my BPO days, I was CEO of a payroll BPO company, and you were only as good as the last paycheck you cut on behalf of your customer. So I think there's, what we've been very successful as, particularly as our business has scaled, and, today we are a $1.2 billion business, and I might add one of the few billion-dollar cloud businesses making a profit. But what's interesting at that scale is finding the right talent to manage customers and manage that customer lifecycle process. And we've been very successful at looking at adjacent areas for talent. So looking at the outsourcing industry, looking at some of the traditional industries people wouldn't think of to go get cloud talent, and actually nurturing them and developing them into cloud talent, because the customer lifecycle management process in the cloud world is very different to the on-premise software world, as you've probably all know, but very similar to the outsourcing and the BPO type world.
Well, I didn't hear you with the analogy about the one-night stand. I heard you say you don't drop the box and go anymore, where everyone's just dropping the box and running out the door, which is probably very common with SaaS. And now it's really about building those relationships. And this happens to tie back to sales and how people are selling. Because it's not so much about selling software anymore, it's what you've said about selling outcomes. And you said this on Firing Line. And I was wondering, what do you mean by that? How is it different?
So I think people find this somewhat controversial that, one of the things we have ingrained in our teams and our people is that we don't sell software. And that might sound contradictory if you're in a software company or a SaaS business, but we fundamentally believe we sell outcomes to customers. And customers in the SaaS world, and particularly as you scale more into the enterprise marketplace, customers are not interested in the technology per se. They're interested in the outcome and how the technology enables the outcome. So, one of the big philosophies we have is that the journey is as important as the end game. And what do we mean by that? Well, in the software world, there's a lot of focus on just selling the technology and selling the software. But the journey to how you get value and how you get business value, be it the transformation you're running in HR, be it the transformation you're running in sales, that journey is as important. So you could buy the greatest software and still fail in your business outcomes if the journey is not orchestrated properly. So really getting your organization and your people to understand and fundamentally believe that you're selling an outcome, you're not selling bits and bytes, is very key to how we position the business. Now, to get people to buy into selling an outcome, you've got to look at everything in the value chain. And everything in the value chain starts with sales. It goes through contracting. It goes through how you deliver, how the client implements, how you manage adoption, how clients manage releases, and how do you get to the renewals at the end of the day. And all of that has to be really aligned really well, because what we see in the cloud space today is that very often you cannot sell a renewal. So if you're trying to sell a renewal, by the time you get to that point and you're trying to sell it, it's too late. Very often the renewal is set years before, and it's based on how the sale process went, it's based on how the implementation went. A lot of those perceptions are set way up front in the life cycle. So, really getting your teams to think about, we sell outcomes, we don't sell software, and what are those outcomes which we are really enabling with our solution at a customer, and how do you measure those outcomes and get your adoption teams to really focus on those outcomes, I think is key to driving customer lifecycle and customer lifetime value.
Well, a lot of these companies are making these decisions early on. I know at my company, when we wrote the code early on, it was because we wanted to see that long-term relationship. And a lot of tech companies might need to set themselves up from the very beginning. You talk about end-to-end service delivery and how important it is, and that you actually changed this model within SuccessFactors. What do you do differently at SuccessFactors compared to other tech companies for end-to-end service, and in what way are you emphasizing this in the personalized for that experience for each company and the self-service software element?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to this concept again of the outcomes, and I'll relate it back to my sort of training and upbringing in the outsourcing world. I was kind of a student of EDS, so Ross Perot days. But, in the outsourcing world, people fundamentally have it's natural to realize to deliver the outcome, you've got all these capabilities, be it data center, be it application management people, be it support people, be it NOC people, you've got all these capabilities, and you have to bring them together to deliver an outcome to the customer. What I saw in the SaaS world was that realization was somewhat blurred, because the focus was too skewed to just the pure technology and the pure software. So we changed the way we organized in the business, and we created some different roles which are somewhat different, which I'll talk about in a minute, to really get much more focus around the outcome and all of this capability. So the first thing we did was the person who engages with the customer, whether you call them an account manager or whether you call them an adoption executive, we call them client engagement executives, has to have the power and the authority to string those capabilities together, to get the capabilities to do what is needed for the customer. And you might say, well, you can do that at an enterprise level when it's more larger customers, but the trick is to do this in a one-to-many model, and to do it in a highly repeatable and highly scalable way. So they need to have that empowerment. The other thing we've done, which is quite unique amongst our industry, is that we've created two focuses around client engagement. So we've got the client engagement role, which is very focused on adoption. And that role is very focused around, how does my customer use the product? Have they got the right configurations? What new functionality is coming out? Are they getting to their business case? The adoption executives have to understand the HR transformation business case. And they have to be working with the customer to figure out how's the software going to enable that business case. I think the reality, what we've seen is a lot of the cloud business has grown up kind of going direct to the line of business buyer. So a lot of cloud companies are focused on a line of business proposition, and you grab the line of business buyer and you work with the line of business buyer. Well, as cloud has become mainstream, what you're now seeing is that the CIO is back in the picture. And the CIO is looking at all this and saying, okay, cool, I'm cool with cloud, we'll have cloud, but how's this all going to work? And what is my collaboration strategy? What is my integration strategy? and all of that stuff. So what we've done is also created a client service executive, which is much more focused on the technology aspect. So, particularly when you're running cloud solutions in core back office HR type environments, how this all integrates into payroll, into finance, into different areas. Do you have one collaboration tool? Do you have one analytics strategy across the company, or do you have analytics by line of business? All these architectural issues are now becoming really key in the enterprise companies as they move to cloud. So having an account-based person who really understands technology and architecture, not the solution and the product in terms of adoption, but how do you architect this? How do you set up your post-implementation function? So if you think about most companies, they've had application management outsourcing or application management services for their on-premise software. You now come along with cloud, and some of that goes away because the application doesn't have to be managed, but now there's other things which are needed. And clients don't know necessarily how do they set that up and how do they manage those environments post the implementation. So having those sort of architectural, technical resources assigned to customers alongside adoption people who really are product specialists, we see has made a huge difference in terms of how our cloud solutions get embraced and accepted in the organization, and how you get both the IT function as well as the line of business function, aligned around the roadmap they're on and the journey they're on. So, I think that's been a key aspect. I think the big area which is going to become really key for customer lifecycle management is how you as cloud companies and how we use the telemetry, what I call the telemetry. So, when you've got a cloud environment, you've got this massive data exhaust, activity going on. There's so much data you're gathering on your customer in terms of usage patterns, configuration data, how they switch functionality on, how they don't switch it on, how they run queries, what do they do on the system, what ad hoc reporting they're doing, everything we know. And I think what you're going to start seeing in the next the next couple of years is the way the telemetry is going to be used to manage the customer lifecycle is going to be pretty exciting, because a lot of what I think we're doing today in the customer lifecycle management, and a lot of cloud companies are doing, could be eliminated if you use the telemetry more effectively, and if you created the software to do it more effectively. And I think, particularly when you're building enterprise cloud solutions, those activities are going to be built into the core suite. So why should a customer have to talk to someone to renew their contract? Why shouldn't they be able to look at their usage patterns themselves and decide what they want to do and decide where they want to go and be able to do it in their own way? So, our holy grail is to get to a world of post-implementation, total independence, so self-reliance. Customers are totally reliant on no integrators in terms of how they go forward post-implementation. And the second holy grail we're chasing, which I think is a little bit further off, but with machine learning is getting closer and closer, is around how do you create a world of self-implementation, which is we've seen a lot of self-implementation models in the SME space, but the real challenge and the real exciting opportunity is how do you create self-implementation in the enterprise space.
And I'm very excited about that one as well. Now, you guys, we're going to be letting you go just after this last question. I wanted to know, is there anything else that you have closing thoughts on, or anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we end the final 2 days of the Customer Success Summit?
Yeah, I think, when I look at our customers, and just to give you a feel of the scale, we've got 5,000 clients and we've got 50 million employees live on our cloud environments across the globe. And I think the most interesting aspect for me and the most challenging aspect for me is, as you scale these businesses, a lot of cloud companies start out in the valley. You start out with smaller customers, but everyone's chasing, this holy grail of, the multinationals and the big corporations in terms of where you want to get to. I would say the most important thing I focus on today, I probably spend 40% of my time on it, is talent management. And you might say, oh, okay, he's going to give you the standard talent management spiel. Well, no, I need to focus on talent management because we got a business which is doubling every 2.5 years and doubling off a 1.1 billion revenue base. So 2 billion in 2.5 years' time. The people who can run a business at 100 million or at 1 billion are not necessarily the people who can run your business at 2 billion or 2.5 billion. So, my encouragement to everyone is to don't think about talent today. Think about talent you need in 8 quarters' time or 4 quarters' time, and think more laterally around where you can get talent. In the place we're playing, the air for talent is very thin because I can find a lot of people who understand cloud, but not at my scale, and I can find a lot of people who understand my scale, but don't understand cloud. So trying to find talent is a very, very difficult challenge. So start thinking about that. Start experimenting with lateral talent. And the other thing I would say is that customer lifecycle management, at the end of the day, is directly correlated to employee engagement. So, I guarantee you, if you can get what we call all-in employees, if you can get your employees highly engaged, all-in, highly motivated, you'll have better renewal rates, you'll have better customer lifecycle management, you'll have better outcomes from your customers. So, the whole talent, the employee experience, I believe is a big area to focus on because, we all know in the cloud world, particularly when you're starting solutions, I always describe the world of cloud software as the David Copperfield world because, it's always about, look at this great feature and this great functionality, and it's all the sizzle which everyone's got to have. And don't worry about the fact that we can't do debits and credits. We'll get to that. You don't need debits and credits for an accounting system. Most cloud companies are built that way. They're built with the David Copperfield effect. And to make that work, you need highly engaged people. You need all these all-in people all the time. So focus on your employees, focus on your people. I always say people first, people before strategy. Get the people right, and your customer value and your customer satisfaction will follow.
So get the people, but also be forward-looking because whatever it looks like today is not going to be the landscape in 6 months.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for your time. And everybody, that's a wrap.